believe that that promise is being jeopardized by very well-financed, moneyed interests. I believe that's the truth, and I'm going to keep saying it.
Tim.
Senator Clinton.
We do not want these race-based questions coming from you two. These are race-based questions.
Senator Clinton, your husband said that Senator Obama very well could be the nominee. He could win. With that in mind, when you say that Senator Obama is raising false hopes and you refuse to say whether he's ready to be president, what are the consequences of those comments in the fall against the Republican?
Well, Tim, we're in a hard-fought primary season. I think each of us recognize that. You know, we're the survivors of what has been a year-long campaign. But I certainly have the highest regard for both Senator Obama and Senator Edwards. I've worked with them. I have, supported them in their previous runs for office. There's no doubt that when we have a nominee, we're going to have a totally unified Democratic Party. The issue for the voters here in Nevada, South Carolina, and then all of the states to come is who is ready on day one to walk into that Oval Office knowing the problems that are going to be there, waiting for our next president, a war to end in Iraq, a war to resolve in Afghanistan, an economy that I believe is slipping toward a recession, with the results already being felt here in Nevada with the highest home foreclosure rate in the entire country. 47 million Americans uninsured, an energy policy that is totally wrong for America, for our future. President Bush is over in the Gulf now begging the Saudis and others to drop the price of oil. How pathetic. We should have an energy policy right now, putting people to work in green-collar jobs as a way to stave off the recession, moving us toward energy independence. All of that and more is waiting for our next president. Obviously each of us believes that we are the person who should walk into that Oval Office on January 20th, 2009. I'm presenting my experience, my qualifications, my ideas, my vision for America. And it's rooted in the voices that I hear, that I've heard for 35 years, of people who want a better life for themselves and their children. And I'm going to keep, putting forward what I have done and what I will do. And this is what this election, I think, is really about.
You may think you are the best prepared, but would you acknowledge that Senator Obama and Senator Edwards are both prepared to be president?
Well, I think that that's up to the voters to decide. I think that's something that voters have to make a decision about on all of us. They have to look at each and every one of us and imagine us in the Oval Office, imagine us as Commander-in-Chief, imagine us making tough decisions about everything we know we're going to have to deal with, and then all of the unpredictable events that come through the door of the White House and land on the desk of the president.
Senator Obama, you gave an interview to the Reno Gazette-Journal, and you said we all have strengths and weaknesses. You said one of your weaknesses is, quote, "I'm not an operating officer." Do the American people want someone in the Oval Office who is an operating officer?
Well, I think what I was describing was how I view the presidency. Now, being president is not making sure that schedules are being run properly or the paperwork is being shuffled effectively. It involves having a vision for where the country needs to go. It involves having the capacity to bring together the best people and being able to spark the kind of debate about how we're going to solve health care, how we're going to solve energy, how we are going to deliver good jobs and good wages, how we're going to keep people in their homes here in Nevada, and then being able to mobilize and inspire the American people to get behind that agenda for change. That's the kind of leadership that I've shown in the past. That's the kind of leadership that I intend to show as President of the United States. So what's needed is sound judgment, a vision for the future, the capacity to tap into the hopes and dreams of the American people and mobilize them to push aside those special interests and lobbyists and forces that are standing in the way of real change, and making sure that you have a government that reflects the decency and the generosity of the American people. That's the kind of leadership that I believe I can provide.
You said each of you have strengths and weaknesses. I want to ask each of you quickly. Your greatest strength, your greatest weakness.
My greatest strength, I think, is the ability to bring people together from different perspectives, to get them to recognize what they have in common and to move people in a different direction. And as I indicated before, my greatest weakness, I think, is when it comes to, I'll give you a very good example. I ask my staff never to hand me paper until 2 seconds before I need it, because I will lose it. And my desk in my office doesn't look good. I've got to have somebody around me who is keeping track of that stuff. And that's not trivial. I need to have good people in place who can make sure that systems run. That's what I've always done, and that's why we've run not only a good campaign, but a good U.S. Senate office.
Senator Edwards, greatest strength, greatest weakness.
I think my greatest strength is that for 54 years I've been fighting with every fiber of my being. In the beginning, the fight was for me. Growing up in mill towns and mill villages, I had to literally fight to survive. But then I spent 20 years in courtrooms fighting for children and families against really powerful, well-financed interests. I learned from that experience, by the way, that if you're tough enough and you're strong enough and you got the guts and you're smart enough, you can win. That's a fight that can be won. It can be won in Washington, too, by the way. And I've continued that fight my entire time in public life. So I've got what it takes inside to fight on behalf of the American people and on behalf of the middle class. I think weakness, I sometimes have a very powerful emotional response to pain that I see around me. When I see a man like Donnie Ingram, who I met a few months ago in South Carolina, who worked for 33 years in the mill, reminded me very much of the kind of people that I grew up with, who's about to lose his job, has no idea where he's going to go, what he's going to do. I mean, his dignity and self-respect is at issue. And I feel that in a really personal way and in a very emotional way. And I think sometimes that can undermine what you need to do.
Senator Clinton.
Well, I am passionately committed to this country and what it stands for. I'm a product of the changes that have already occurred, and I want to be an instrument for making those changes alive and real in the lives of Americans, particularly children. That's what I've done for 35 years. It is really my life's work. It is something that comes out of my own experience, both in my family and in my church, that, I've been blessed. And I think to whom much is given, much is expected. So I have tried to create opportunities, both on an individual basis, intervening to help people who have nowhere else to turn, to be their champion, and then to make those changes. And I think I can deliver change. I think I understand how to make it possible for more people to live up to their God-given potential. I get impatient. I get, really frustrated when people don't seem to understand that we can do so much more to help each other. And sometimes I come across that way. I admit that. I get very concerned about, pushing further and faster than perhaps people are ready to go. But I think that, there is a difference here. I do think that being president is the chief executive officer. And I respect what Barack said about setting the vision, setting the tone, bringing people together. But I think you have to be able to manage and run the bureaucracy. You've got to pick good people, certainly, but you have to hold them accountable every single day. We've seen the results of a president who, frankly, failed at that. He went into office saying he was going to have the kind of Harvard Business School CEO model where he'd set the tone, he'd set the goals, and then everybody else would have to implement it. And we saw the failures. We saw the failures along the Gulf Coast with, people who were totally incompetent and insensitive, failing to help our fellow Americans. We've seen the failures with holding the administration accountable with the no-bid contracts and the cronyism. So I do think you have to do both. It's a really hard job. And in America, we put, the head of state and the head of government together in one person. But I think you've got to set the tone, you've got to set the vision, you've got to set the goals, you've got to bring the country together, and then you do have to manage and operate and hold that bureaucracy accountable to get the results you're trying to achieve.
Senator Obama, Senator Clinton, invoke your name. I'll give you a chance to respond.
Well, there's no doubt that you've got to be a good manager, and that's not what I was arguing. The point in terms of bringing together a team is that you get the best people and you're able to execute and hold them accountable. But I think that there's something, if we're going to evaluate George Bush and his failures as president, that I think are much more important.